This episode of Be the Leader podcast is brought to you by the Emerging Leader Inner Circle Live event. If you are the leader of a group of people that have incredible potential and a hunger to grow in their leadership and personal growth journey, Emerging Leader Inner Circle Live is for you. We will be celebrating the year-long growth journey of the current members, introducing the next leaders to join, and giving everyone in attendance the opportunity to bring their emerging leaders into the room, into the inner circle. You can get your invitation by emailing me at david@davidmcglennon.com. Team rates are available. And now here's today's episode. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome once again to the Be the Leader podcast. I am so excited for today's guest. Today's guest is a special one because not only has he been a client of mine, but he has been a mentor. He is a mentor. And more importantly, he's a friend. And so I want to introduce you to Mike Dempe. Mike is an amazing leader. He is happily married of 35 years with 3 great children, all who are caring citizens of the world, as he says. And he's an experienced business leader. He's got a strong financial background and a real passion for leadership. So it's going to be a great conversation today. He is the president of a business that organically tripled in size, which is an amazing feat. So we'll probably dig into that a little bit. He led the business as a private company. He led it during a merger. He then led it through a sale. And then the last 15 years, he's led this company as a public company, a publicly traded company. He graduated from Penn State with an accounting degree. He started out his career at Arthur Andersen. And now he is focused on succession planning and the development of the next generation of leaders. So this is going to be a great conversation. Welcome to the podcast, Mike.
Dave, thanks so much. I appreciate the invitation. I look forward to talking with you.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun one today for sure. So tell us a little bit about, how did you start out in accounting, and then, kind of how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, good fortune, first of all. But it's interesting, the journey, Dave. I started in accounting for very specific reasons. I've always been infatuated, for whatever reason, with small businesses. And I've always believed that if you understood how the score was kept, you could figure out the rules of the game and the rules of the players. And so that was really the reason. And so I ended up at Arthur Andersen because they had the largest small business practice. And it was an amazing experience that, had over 100 clients during that period of time. And keep in mind, at that point, I was coming at it strictly from the numbers side.
Yeah.
But what I did learn, it was incredible how many families that had businesses were dysfunctional. That the business was very successful, but the family didn't like themselves, or a lot of splits. And what I've now learned to be a culture, back then I just recognized it as something that I did not want to be as part of that experience. And so that's how the opportunity came about, that after 10 years, I had the opportunity to go to a client that was growing, yet it was the people that I respected the most that I had met during the 10 years. And quite honestly, it was a great business opportunity. But the attraction for me was to see if the human opportunity was as good on the inside as it looked on the outside. And fortunately for me, it was even better.
Oh, that's awesome.
Most amazing people that were able to care for people, treat people with respect, and still run a very successful business. So it was a great learning experience. And for me, actually became the most influential male in my life, other than my dad, just learning from the second generation of the founder of this business.
Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. What, in that process of learning and growing, was there any one thing or something that was most surprising to you as you kind of walked through that process of moving from the accounting side into the business and learning with families and family run businesses and things like that?
Yes, to take it to one is a challenge, but the one that always sticks out is I was this young, energetic guy here with all the answers, and nobody cared, and nobody had the questions, and nobody wanted to listen because life was good. And so it was a very interesting time for me, that, you know, I learned to collaborate with those that wanted to, and not with those that didn't want to, not to force my way, not to set an agenda, because I was in the accounting group and that really wasn't my role. But the market does what the market does. And as some changes came about, some of the ideas became more needed. The business needed to make some changes. So that was the first thing. It was really, I didn't recognize it at that point, what I would call alignment today, after a lot of coaching and reading. But how important it is, if you're going to be successful, to have the team aligned and wanting and desiring the same thing. And so that was a big learning.
Yeah. How did you go through the process of aligning the people so that they were aligned?
Yeah, and it's interesting, because as I look back, I didn't at the overall level. In fact, probably one of the biggest growing opportunities and challenges of my career was finally getting to do that in this business 2 years ago. So 30 years goes by, and that was one of the challenges that this particular business has always had, of having a lot of very strong individuals who had different opinions. But it was during that time, Dave, it was interesting that I stumbled upon a book, an audio book, because I've always had long commutes. And so some people may remember the little disc that you would use before CDs. But I came across the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And it was sort of a revelation to me. It was like really interesting stuff. And I remember reading it and then sitting down at the accounting department and sort of did it as a group. And it's funny how later on I came back and, you know, those things have become part of who I am. But it was the beginning for me of realizing that there was a whole world of leadership, self-leadership, business leadership that I'd never been exposed to. And so now I'm a dozen years into my career, realizing that I knew the accounting side. I had gotten promoted because I knew the technical side, but had never heard one thing about how to help other people grow, or really what the job of a leader is, and how you can truly leverage a business. So your point about alignment, I didn't even realize at that point that was a thing.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Yeah. So then how did you like work your way through it? Did you just, you know, take one step? I mean, I'm just kind of curious, like, how did you even know what to do next?
Yeah, it's interesting. And, you know, you can only go backwards in life, right?
Right.
So I did what I think a lot of folks do, is you just do the best you can. And you don't really have the right tools to do it. And it really wasn't, and literally it was about 12 years ago, and we were going through, you know, we talked about the part of my career where we went through the merger and the sale, and it was a very disruptive time in the business, personal reasons, for business reasons, a lot of changes. And so we were going through a large change in leadership. And we had a couple very senior leaders that, as I look back, really didn't have the desire. But I didn't define it at that point. And so I had a friend who was a very successful individual entrepreneur, and I asked him how he had the discipline to succeed. And he introduced me. It's the first time I heard of an executive coach. Didn't know they existed. Now I realize there's lots of different types. But it was fascinating. So it was the first and the last time that I used an executive coach to do anything other than help strong people get stronger. At this point, we were trying to help people who weren't strong, making sure that we did everything we could before we had to terminate the relationship. But after that, and it of course didn't work, I started working with this individual. And then through the years, you know, it was just like an awakening. You know, one topic led to the other topic. I started doing more reading. And I started realizing that leadership is very different than being the boss.
Yeah.
And, so it was a slow, but keep in mind, Dave, I was probably 20 years into my career at this point.
Yeah.
And so it was a great awakening. And then it, has picked up speed. You and I met, I had certainly matured in the relationship, and that particular coach had a perspective. It was more a tactical perspective than a broader leadership, but tremendously helpful. And with him, I started introducing him to the organization. And so it's funny is I now look at it, and you look at any professional athlete, they'll have a coach. Right. Nobody can be the best they can be without an outside independent knowledge source holding them accountable and teaching them different things. All the way up to the Hall of Fame people. And yet in the business world, that didn't exist. At least it didn't exist in my world. Now, as I've gotten into it, it does exist. It's just not prevalent to a lot of people, but it's been a blessing for me, Dave. So for a couple of reasons. One is the time I had met you, we had matured as a business to start to understand that the culture of a business is actually something that the leader creates. Intentionally or unintentionally.
Right.
And you were just fabulous with helping us realize that there was a process to do that with. And that's how, you and I started working together.
Right.
And you bring a very elevated perspective. And neither one's better or worse. It's just you were what I needed at that point in time.
Sure.
Both from the culture, but also from the leadership perspective. And so I really enjoyed learning and working with you because, again, what helps the business is help me understand and broaden. And as you continue to challenge me with new learning materials and holding me accountable, pushing me out of my comfort zone,
like today, right?
Right. Amen. You guys can learn new tricks.
Yes.
But also, the biggest help has been to my team. And so as I've sort of learned, and Dave, quite honestly, when I started, thinking that my primary job was to make my team better wasn't on my radar, as embarrassing as that is.
Yeah.
It was obvious you want to hire and develop good people, but it wasn't obvious to me that that was the single biggest thing that I could be doing. Because again, I had always been in that, I was a doer, I was a performer, I had to perform and do more and more, as opposed to realizing if I could slow down and think a little bit. I had people that were much better than I at these things in the room. I just had to give them the tools and align with where we were going.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah. It's been a tremendous learning. I had gone through a lot of 360s.
Sure.
Number one comment to me was, let me go. I micromanaged too much. I was doing it from a standpoint of trying to help them, trying to make it so their plate wasn't too full.
Yeah.
And what I learned is I was hurting them and not letting them have the same growing pains that I had gone through.
Sure.
It was a dramatic change. And Dave, this is probably all within the last 10 years. But now by being able to speak to people honestly, truly caring about developing them, being very clear, they can do as much as they want. Just define what my role is and we'll define what your role is, and holding people accountable. It's been transformational. I've had to reinvent my job because people are doing my old job.
Yeah.
Differently. And so I've made a base that they can grow from.
Yeah.
So that's really been very helpful. But then, as you know, you've worked with some of these folks individually and sort of under the theory that it takes a village to raise the child. It's allowed me to leverage what I want from the organization. It's allowed other individuals to grow and expand that. And you become, as that coach, that consistent, sort of what the vision is. And then in a confidential way, you help each of the people grow themselves. So it's been neat that things I never knew existed when I started, I now become most passionate about.
Yeah, that's so cool. And one thing I know about you and in the times that we've shared together and just talked, and culture is a real big thing for you. And I've loved seeing your growth and the growth of your passion over the past number of years. And um, I'm just curious, and you mentioned something just a minute ago that the leader sets the culture. Uh, You tell me more about that. Like, how did you come to that realization, and really what's driving your passion for setting a culture that is both delivering results but also people centered? Because I know that's a big thing coming together.
A huge challenge, exactly. First, being very vulnerable when I recognized the fact that all the problems of my business were owned by me.
Mm,
Because at the end of the day, whatever I accepted
mm,
was what was accepted.
sure.
So it's not so much that I create the culture by going out and doing stuff. I allow the culture to occur by not doing the right thing. And
Interesting.
so I
Yeah.
remember when I was offered the position of president years ago, and the owner looking at me and saying, I just want you to remember one thing. You can do a lot more harm with this title than you can do good.
Wow.
And it reverberated through the years. So to me, Dave, that balance is not, culture always sounds like such a soft thing. You have cookies out, M&Ms for everybody.
Right.
And I've come to learn that it's anything but that.
Mm,
As you and I have talked, it's really everything about the business. It's just like a family. It's the fabric that holds you together, be it the business processes or the social cues or what you do at lunchtime. But it's all aimed at accomplishing the mission
yeah.
of the organization. So it's anything but soft. It's actually very hard to do that. It's hard to be compassionate when you're not meeting the numbers and yet realize that it's not because anyone's not doing their job, it's because collectively we haven't figured out the right answer. Everybody wants to succeed, but we haven't necessarily provided the right tools.
Sure.
But while harder, it's a lot stronger as you build the trust of people to realize we're all in this together, allow people to truly do their most creative and best work in a safe environment. So
Yeah.
quite a learning experience.
How have you helped that? I mean, how have you facilitated that? You talk about allowing everybody to do their own job and to do it in a safe environment. How have you facilitated that, and what have you seen as some successes of that?
Yeah, Dave, that's a great question. And I mentioned one of the hardest leadership lessons I had came a couple of years ago when the business that we're in, like so many businesses, was changing very,
Yeah.
very rapidly.
Mm.
And we were going to have to do things different.
Mm-hmm.
And so goes back to my comment before, we have a business that really hadn't been aligned for the 25, 30 years I had been there and for the decades before.
Wow.
And we realized that we had to very quickly align on what the purpose, the mission of the business was going to be.
Mm. Yeah.
And how we were going to go from point A to point B.
Mm-hmm.
And we did that by having the senior leaders in a room, having a lot of straight talk and a lot of emotion.
Mm.
And at the end of the day, came up with this is what we were going to do. And yet, not everybody agreed with that. And it goes back, that's where the alignment issue came from. And we were challenged because these were folks that were very talented individuals and were friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the reality was we were going in different directions.
Sure.
And so that's really where it became incumbent on me as a leader to make the right call.
Sure.
And so we had to help people head off to what their passions were, which were different than what our passions were.
Yeah.
And so through that, Dave, it was doing everything we could do to be humane, but really focusing on those that were here now. And with that clarity, asking, because they had helped develop the plan, asking how I could help each of them. And that has really been the transformation of my job to help as opposed to do. And so, it has become a series of communication meetings as a team. We have a regular cycle on a monthly basis. Every week we have a different type of meeting. And then it's on individual meetings, personally with each of them. Again, starting with, they set the agenda, what do they need help with, we know what the goals are. And it has become an environment where I'm not micromanaging, I'm not going in with the agenda. And I've watched people become much more vulnerable themselves, where they can share what keeps them up at night. And things in the past that they would want to make sure they were always presenting to quote the boss. Yeah. They're now partnering with an advisor because they own doing it. And if they don't do it, we all lose. Right. If they do it, we all win. So we're all sort of aligned, Dave. So it's been a very powerful transformation. Yeah. It came through a lot of difficulty in speaking straight and a lot of conversations with you through that period of time.
Yeah, right. Well, it's interesting. I loved your language, and I pick up on this. You talked about transformation, and instead of presenting to quote unquote a boss, they're presenting to their partner, their advisor. And if we don't deliver, then we all lose. And that's a big thing. And I think that there are a lot of leaders that miss that, and they want to be quote unquote the boss. And that's not the way to lead. And so I picked up on that language, and I think that's really an important point. So I think that as people are listening, I think that's a takeaway. If I were to take away something, it's to begin to shift your mindset from being the boss to being the advisor, the partner, the leader. And I don't know if you would agree with that or not. I'm assuming you probably would.
Absolutely, Dave. It's amazing the untapped power of a team or a teammate. That earlier in my career, I was one of the people you just defined, all for the right reasons. I just didn't know there was another path. Yeah. And I always felt that I had to manage everything. And then I became the bottleneck because nobody could do things until
you said go. Yeah, sure.
Versus now, the freedom to do so many new and different things, which is great for the business, because instead of having to do, I just had to teach. Yeah. And the other people, quite honestly, I like being the least smart person in the room. That now I don't put a ceiling on people. Before they would have stopped with what I wanted them to do, not realizing they could far exceed that with their own style and their own energy. And I realized that I needed to become the floor, not the ceiling. So you're right, Dave. That issue of trust and clarity has been an amazing growth opportunity very late in my career, but actually more excited about coming to work now than I've ever been. Yeah. But doing something very different. But to me, that ability to leverage, the ability to create more is what you're talking about. To me,
yeah, and I think that as you've articulated, the ability to do more with a team as opposed to just an individual, the power is so. I mean, it's just beyond comparison. Why we try to do things on our own is just unbelievable, because
it's actually exponential, Dave. Yeah, it's amazing for how many years. As I said, I was actually the limitation. Sure. And I think we all get into that point because the organization can only grow as big as you allow it to grow. And if you can find a way to have more time and to have it grow bigger. Yeah.
That's the best of all worlds, right?
Again, it's like anything else. You need to talk to somebody who really knows what that is and how to do that, because there is a process to do that. It doesn't just happen.
Right.
It's working at that just like anything else, and you need to study the disciplines that are necessary, but they're there. And I'm a big believer that, again, that's why I laugh, as I go back to start being the numbers guy, that the numbers continue to be important. Yeah. But it's the story behind the numbers that really is important, and the people that make it all possible.
Yeah. If you had to go back and, talk to, kind of time travel through, the Back to the Future DeLorean car, if you had to time travel back, let's say 30 years ago to that Mike Dempe, what would you tell him that now that you'd want him to know, like back then?
go this way, not that way.
Not that way.
I could have helped so many more people in a more meaningful way. Would have helped the business in a much more meaningful way. It would be interesting. But yeah, Dave, I would really have changed my style much earlier.
Yeah,
I would have taken advantage of the resources because it's just been so rewarding. Because I think we all want to watch the world get better. We all want to watch other people win, but there wasn't a clear path to how that was really my job. That there was a way to get the job done through empowerment. And I guess the biggest, if I had to put it into a word, if I look back, Dave, I've learned to enable a lot of people instead of empowering them.
Oh, wow. That's really good distinction.
And so by explaining, teaching, and holding people accountable versus thinking I have to have my fingers in it all the time, I enable people not to have to do things in the past, which was to their detriment because I had grown through it. I didn't give them the opportunity to go through it. So that is something that today I'm extremely aware of with all of my actions of whether or not I'm empowering or enabling.
That's such a great distinction. I love that. One of the things that I often talk to business leaders about, and I don't know if I've coined the phrase, but I talk about future-proofing the business. And you talked about earlier how fast business is moving and how fast things change. And how do you, as you look into the future, and you've talked about, succession planning and really working with the next generation of leaders, how do you see that? How do you see empowering the next generation of leaders impacting the future of the business?
No, it's interesting, Dave. It's interesting because one of our clients is in the fast food or quick serve restaurant business. They were just ranked #1 in the industry this year. And they're already declaring next year being a red year because competition is so great.
Wow.
So when you talk about the speed of change, it doesn't matter if you're at the very top or struggling. We're all facing the same issues of speed to provide a better value at a lower price point and a faster time to our customer, whoever they are.
Yeah.
And so as that world changes, quite honestly, there are some disciplines which I think are timeless, but there's also technologies and mind thoughts which are very fresh and new.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's what I'm watching, and that's what I tell the folks that are taking over is I want to see this business flourish. Again, I go back to I'm leaving you with a floor. I expect it to be much bigger and better because each of them, quite honestly, have different skills and things they do much better than I do. Yeah. And this will allow them to take that. But again, there's some disciplines and some things that experiences they've had to learn that are just some of those fundamental basics. So it's fun to watch because the future is going to be very different.
Yeah, that's that. And as you even look at your leaders, your current leaders, how do you see them adapting and reacting to your new leadership style? Because I mean, some of the team members have been around for a while, and yet you've adapted and you've learned. So what's that experience been like?
It's actually, I'll keep going back to vulnerability. There's been a lot of very honest conversations, both in a group and on one-to-one. I mean, at the end of the day, to me, it comes down to relationships.
Yeah.
And so it's actually been very positive because as we've gone through this, I think there's a feeling of shared vulnerability because, well, I'm changing, they're changing, we're in this together. And quite honestly, I've been very open about it. Sometimes I'm going to step too far into your turf and you just need to tell me. But as people have understood why I'm doing it differently, that has been the magic. There's that trust because they know I'm doing it because I care for them. They know that I care for the ultimate end of the day. We owe an answer, we owe results. So I just don't ever want people to think this is without results. It, to me, is a better way to get results and to get people to grow.
Yeah.
And so it comes down to trust. And I've actually had people say that the things they wouldn't have told me in the past, they're delighted now that they know they can tell me because I've earned their trust, because they understand better what I'm trying to accomplish. And actually, in the past, I felt kind of lonely at times because there's so much I thought you couldn't talk to your team about. But as I've realized that integrity, transparency, and vulnerability provides a bigger team of leaders for the business, I think they've benefited, they've enjoyed it, and I know I have. So it's been a true win-win.
That's great. One maybe last question here for you, Mike, as we're kind of wrapping up. When you talk to other business leaders, or if you were to talk with other business leaders, what would you tell them about the last couple of years of your leadership journey, your growth journey, whether it's culture, whether it's leadership, whether it's, future-proofing your company for the next generation? What would you tell them? What's one or two things that you really would say are really crucial for them to know? So if you're, imagine you're talking to another CEO through this podcast. What would you want them to know, or what's your learnings?
First, before I answer your question, Dave, I like the struggle you had. Do you call it leadership? Do you call it culture? Do you call it future-proofing?
Yep.
I think, and you and I have talked about this, it's an ecosystem.
Yeah, it is.
It's all tied together, and it has to be consistent. But very similar to what I would tell the earlier version of myself, that there is a different way. And you can tell pretty quickly when talking to people if they're focused on leadership and culture or not. And so as I have those conversations, if people are willing, because again, to me, it all goes back to alignment. Some people just simply don't agree. And that's fine. I mean, there's different ways to be successful.
Yeah.
I just don't think it is as sustainable or as powerful as inclusion and empowerment. So, but those that are listening, we have great conversations, and I've been blessed to end up being mentor to some folks through an internal program. And I share our conversation with them, and I've been thrilled to see the receptivity of that, the people first, the leadership. And so a lot of the things that you and I have talked about, a person in Germany that I'm talking with, I have a person in Chicago, and it's been received well by younger folks. And as I always tell them, this is what I wish I would have known when I was your age.
Yeah, no, I love that.
And so really, Dave, but you need to, first of all, people need to know there is a way, but then I would highly recommend people work with somebody like you or whatever. Don't try to figure it out totally on yourself. It takes too much time.
Yeah, no, that's good. I appreciate that. And I'm gonna feel like Columbo here, because I just a question popped into my mind as you were talking, and I'm gonna go one more thing. We started out talking about the early part of your career in accounting, and we've kind of evolved this conversation into culture and leadership. How do you reconcile the two? I mean, like what impact has it had on like the bottom line of the company? How do you quantify that?
Yeah, a couple of funny stories, because the quantification is really, really difficult. I can feel it.
Yeah.
You can see the results, but how do you measure culture and how do you measure engagement is something that we are in our part of the journey. We're actually talking to our employees about that right now. But I remember going through the lean experience, and I'm an accountant. I had the waterfalls of this was going to cause this, and by this quarter we'd have this much. And by the end of that, I put it all away because the results were there, but you couldn't see it. You couldn't see this action led to that action, which led to this. And I find that to be, it's funny. I keep going back to sports metaphors, but a team with good momentum wins. Nobody can define what that momentum is.
Yeah.
And to me, I find that to be very much with culture, Dave. It's difficult to explain why, but it works.
But it works.
And
Yeah.
it keeps working.
Yeah.
And there's a confidence and an excitement level um, that, people are amazing individuals when they feel empowered.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
Oftentimes I don't know the answer, but somebody keeps coming up with it.
Yeah.
So, but it is fascinating, that topic of measurement that
Yeah.
I haven't found a way to quantify doing. That's why I laugh being an accountant and how far I've come. And I'm the one who has come from the number side, where a lot of my teammates have come from the, you need to treat people better side. And we have found that common area that we were both right,
Yeah.
or we were both half wrong. But you really needed both of them. And so that's really the blending that we're doing.
Well, it's funny. I think that one of the team members talked about the magic in the middle. And I think that's just it. You come at it from both ends, and there is a magic. It's just getting there. It's a struggle. You got to try different things. So and that's what I think has been so neat about what I've seen in you, is that you're willing to try those things and you're willing to do those. I remember our first conversation, because you're like, how do you quantify this?
Yes, sir. Old dogs can learn new tricks.
I love it. I love it. Well, Mike, thank you so much for the time that you spent today chatting and sharing your experience, sharing your journey. I think for the people listening, there's two things that I've taken away from this conversation. Rather than being an enabler, being an empowerer, be the one who empowers. And don't be the ceiling, but be the floor. Be the floor to help your people then reach the ceiling, and then maybe blow the ceiling off. And that's exactly what Mike has been doing. And so Mike, thank you again for being here. Our friendship goes beyond our working relationship, and this has been so special to have you on here. And I really appreciate your time, my friend.
Dave, this has been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
You got it.